up this list in our number 10 spot we have the Crying Children paintings. These paintings were a series created by an Italian painter who was known as Giovanni Bragolin, but his real name was Bruno Amarillo. Bruno was born in Venice in 1911 and fought in World War II, which ended up being the inspiration for a lot of his paintings. During his time in the war, he saw a lot of suffering children, and this is where he got the idea for the series of Crying Children paintings. After the paintings were sold, there began to be reports of fires in all of the places where the paintings were held. While this could have just been a strange coincidence, the weirdest part is that the paintings always remained intact while everything else around them was burned. This quickly became the most talked about thing and was on the front of every newspaper, and the paintings quickly gained the nickname Diablo. It caused these paintings to end up being replicated and mass produced, but none of the replicas hold quite the same power as the originals.
Coming in at number 9, we have the occult museum Voodoo Dolls. Voodoo dolls in general are supernatural items. They're little effigies created in magical kind of practices, and for the person on the receiving end, they're bad juju. Pins are placed in the doll in order to harm the subject, which isn't great, not great at all. So with that in mind, a supernatural object used to invoke a curse, do you want to see the Voodoo Dolls from the Ed and Lorraine Warren Museum? Guys, you don't know how hard it is to say Ed and Lorraine Warren in one go. It's a tongue twister. Ed and Lorraine Warren. Either way, Voodoo Dolls. So there is actually a noose on the neck of one of the dolls, which kind of indicates that somebody might have died. The other one has its eyes gouged out, which isn't great either. Visually scary, but also actually scary. It seems that the doll collector came across these dolls and brought them home, only to find that her son's health began deteriorating. It seems that some of the witch's voodoo doll magic had been retained, and it was picked up the boy as a new vessel. The collector contacted the Warrens, who removed the doll, after which the boy made a full recovery. Thank goodness. However, it seems that the story continues. There was a visitor to the museum, and they broke the rules by touching one of the dolls, and later they were involved in a horrifying accident. Who's to blame here? Coming in at number 8, we have the Basanovas. At first, the Bassano vase is a sight to behold. It's a beautifully carved silver vase from the 15th century. It's an antique. But as it's on this list, you may have realised that actually it's a supernatural antique with a curse. Hurrah! The story goes that the vase was made for an Italian wedding as a gift to the bride, who is to be wed in a traditional ceremony in Napoli. On her wedding night, she was excited, but unfortunately an intruder broke in and stabbed her. She was found bleeding to death, clutching the vase. The legend has it that she promised to return and seek vengeance on the person who stopped her marrying her love. After her death, the vase was passed down through the family, but anyone who came in contact with it mysteriously fell ill, or they were met with serious misfortune. Following that, the vase was wrapped up and packed away, but unfortunately it was unearthed again hundreds of years later in the late 80s, when it also started making headlines for continuing its spate of deadly bad luck. Newspaper reports indicate that the vase was buried again in an undisclosed location, hoping that it would stay out of the way with human contact forever this time. Coming in at number 7, we have the evil eye. The curse of the evil eye. Although actually, this is an interesting twist at this point, because these objects actually protect against curses. The evil eye is a curse cast by a malevolent and malicious glare given to a person when they aren't looking. If an evil eye is cast upon you, you are susceptible to injury or misfortune. It could even mean that you're set upon by animals. To protect yourself from the evil eye, usually people carry a talisman with an eye on it, which in themselves look pretty terrifying, but actually they're there to stare down a curse. The evil eye has been incorporated into a lot of protective objects, most popularly jewellery. Also, there are a lot of evil eye wall hangings and wind chimes. I feel like I'd quite like an evil eye bracelet so it can stare down a few evil eyes that have been looking my way recently, like bah! Reflected curse. Coming in at number 6, we have cursed tarot cards. Tarot cards are used in divination, for forecasting rather than predicting. Usually a person formulates a question and seeks an answer from the cards, a deck of 78 individual cards with different meanings. The most famous cards are Death, the Tower and the Devil, all thought to be bad omens, but of course that depends on your interpretation. Some people are convinced that their tarot decks can become cursed and that everything that's forecast will actually happen badly. There is also a superstition that burning tarot cards will bring a curse upon you. It seems that the only way to be rid of a cursed deck of tarots is to drown them, soak them all face down in water. honestly, I'm not so sure about that. I think they work by energy, so if you have bad energy, maybe you'll get bad cards. Coming in at number 5, we have Maori Masks. Maori is the name of the indigenous people of New Zealand and Polynesia. Masks are made to honour their ancestors, and they're often beautifully carved and slightly intimidating to look at. The masks are thought to contain the souls of warriors who died in battle, so pretty supernatural and ghostly if you ask me. While men are fine to be going around touching a Maori mask, females have a much more uncertain time. Legend has it you should never seek out a Maori mask if you're pregnant or menstruating because you could invoke an ancient curse. In October 2010, a museum in New Zealand made headlines when it told a pregnant woman to stay away from the sacred artifacts. Speaking of sacred, at number 4 we have Uluru. Is a rock formation an object? Either way, I'm putting it on this list. Uluru, or Ayers Rock, is both sacred and cursed, if the stories are to be believed. The large sandstone monolith in the Northern Territory of Central Australia is sacred to Aboriginal tribes, the first people of the land. They believe that it is inhabited by the ancestral spirits of the land. The rock started forming 550 million years ago, and it's believed that if a visitor takes a rock from the spot, they will suffer serious misfortune, sometimes even grave misfortune. There have been reports of people returning stones that they've taken from Ayers Rock to try and end their suffering. Shouldn't be taking the rocks in the first place. Coming in at number 3, we have the Terracotta Army. I kind of believe that the Terracotta Army have an air of the supernatural about them. They were, after all, a work of funeral art that were buried with the purpose of protecting an emperor in the afterlife. The thousands of terracotta figures were buried with the first emperor of China in 210 BCE, but they were rediscovered by local farmers thousands of years later in 1974 in Yang Village's rural land. For them though, the discovery was actually a curse. The government didn't pay them well for their findings, and then they took their land and their homes off them in order to build a tourist centre. The government made a lot of money, they didn't. One of the farmers who discovered the soldiers actually killed himself, and the others were met with bad luck, many of whom have died penniless. Coming into number 2, whatever you do, do not touch the demon book. The Book of Soiga is an early 16th century treatise on demonology written in Latin. There are only 2 copies of the book in the world known to us, and one was possessed by the Elizabethan scholar John Dee. Dee spent his life trying to interpret the text, which was filled with spells and rituals. He had a good understanding of what was happening, apart from the final 36 pages, which he just couldn't decipher. He and his trusted friend Edward Kelly summoned the spirit of Uriel to tell them the meaning of the last pages. The legend says that Uriel then possessed Kelly and spoke through him. He claimed that the book came into existence when Adam entered paradise, and that it could only be properly interpreted by the archangel Michael himself. He also said that whoever deciphers the meaning of the last 36 pages will be destined to die 2.5 years later. Why 2.5? We don't know, but I wouldn't want to be reading that book. Finally, coming into number 1, we have the Delhi Purple Sapphire. Also known as the Gem of Sorrow, the Delhi Purple Sapphire was housed in a sacred temple in India, the Temple of Indra in Kanpur. Indra, by the way, is the Hindu god of war and thunderstorms. Amid the British-led turmoil in India, it wasn't uncommon for soldiers to loot sacred temples, stealing their jewels and smuggling them back to Britain. This is exactly what happened with the purple sapphire in question. Colonel W. Ferris took it back to England only to be met with terrible luck. Financial misfortunes befell him, his family got very sick, things started to fall apart. He gave the stone away, and the person who received it committed suicide. The next owner of the sapphire was Edward Heron Allen, who was also met with really bad luck. He bound the stone with silver and attached 2 scarab beetles, and it seemed like the bad luck was contained. However, his dreams were frequently haunted by Hindu yogis until he gave the stone away. The stone then was returned to him, so he threw it in Regent's Canal in London. No prizes for guessing that actually it came back. The story continues over another 100 or so years. More recently, it found its way to a museum, and one night the museum curator was travelling with the stone only to be injured by a terrible storm with his wife.
Starting off this list in our number 10 spot, we have Anna Baker's wedding dress. In 1836, a man named Elias Baker purchased a mansion in Altoona, Pennsylvania, and moved his small family in. Elias's oldest daughter was named Anna, and when she fell in love with a steel worker, things took a very dark turn. Anna's father didn't want her dating this man, but she kept doing it in secret. The story goes that Anna and the man planned a secret wedding and they were going to elope. Unfortunately, Elias found out and freaked out. He apparently purchased the steel mill that this man worked for and then forced him to have to move to an entirely different city so as to prevent him from being able to continue seeing Anna. Anna of course was furious with her father, and I'm sure this was only made worse by his decision to offer other men to her, to which she of course declined because that's just weird. Anna instead locked herself in her room with her wedding dress that she never got to wear. Anna unfortunately never married after that and spent the rest of her life being terribly upset about the whole incident. After her death, it is said that her anger and despair ended up going into the wedding dress. Members of the Baker family reported seeing the dress in different places around the house despite no one moving it themselves. Some have even reported seeing Anna's spirit dressed in the gown around the house as well. In our number 9 spot today we have the Blarney Stone. For hundreds of years the Blarney Stone has resided within Blarney Castle, which is near Cork, Ireland. The stone is a piece of limestone, and legend says that those who give the stone a smooch will then be given the gift of the gab. This little smooch can bestow the power of being able to talk your way out of any situation, which would be incredibly useful, but there are always those who try to indulge in too much of a good thing. The issues start when you attempt to take a piece of the stone, no matter how small, away from its home. Those who don't follow the rules and take the stone end up being cursed with bad luck. Every year the castle receives parcels from greedy tourists who tried their luck at stealing portions of the stone. These parcels are returned with the intention of lifting the curse of misfortune. It is said that once the stone is returned, the curse will be lifted, which is most definitely good news. I guess the moral of this curse, however, is to not be greedy and to just follow the rules. In our number 8 spot today we have the Screaming Skull. The Screaming Skull resides in the Burton Agnes Hall in England, and it is thought to have belonged to Catherine Anne Griffith. It is said that Catherine was the youngest in the family, and she was the one who enjoyed wandering around the property the most. One day while she was out strolling around, she ended up being surrounded by a group of robbers who took all of her possessions and then viciously harmed her and left her for dead. She was found and brought back to the hall to be tended to, but unfortunately a few days later she succumbed to her injuries. Before she died, she was upset about the thought of leaving her family, so she asked them to remove her head after death and keep her skull so that they would always have a piece of her around. The family agreed to her face, but after her passing they buried her body, head still intact, because to be fair, it was an odd request. After her burial, the family began experiencing some extremely strange things around the house, like bumps and moans and horrible blood-curdling screams that they could not find the source of. This is when they decided to follow through with the request Catherine had left them, and the strange occurrences suddenly stopped. After this, at one point a maid had found the skull, and in her surprise, she threw it out of a nearby open window, and alas, the strange occurrences began again. In the end, it was decided that the best policy was to place the skull in a secret spot within the walls of the house, probably behind some paneling in the Great Hall so that its presence could be easily ignored, and so that Catherine's spirit could reside in peace in her beloved home. I guess the lesson of this one is to follow the wishes of those who have passed, because you never know if their spirit is gonna stay lingering around afterwards. In our number 7 spot today we have the Haunted Doll. There's quite a few haunted dolls kicking around out there apparently, but this one doesn't exactly have a name. The doll's owners say that this doll is possessed and causes lots of troubles at night. The incredibly creepy thing about this one is that it is said that you don't need to do anything in order for this doll to decide it wants to haunt you. You just simply need to be around it, and that is more than enough for the torment to start. Owners of the doll have reported getting a bunch of strange scratches, which they believe are because of the doll. It isn't exactly clear where the spirit or spirits that reside in this doll have come from or what happened, but the doll was bought from its previous owners by a woman named Deborah Davies, who is a psychic. Deborah reported the same scratches as the previous owners, but she also may have been able to contact the spirit residing in the doll. She claimed that the spirit was that of a young girl who had her life taken from her, but she also reported that the nasty evil energy within the doll is a male, and she believes that this energy is that of the man who took the life of the girl. At the end of the day, whatever is haunting this doll is certainly a spirit I would like to stay far, far away from. In our number 6 spot today we have the Ballista balls. A ballista was used in the Roman military, and it was kind of similar to a crossbow, but much larger, and it could shoot arrows or stones. In 1989, there were archaeologists that were working by the Israeli-Syrian border when they found these large stones close to what seemed to be the remains of a ballista, but around 1995 the stones ended up getting stolen, and it took a while for anyone to notice. Fast forward to 2015 and the same stones that were stolen ended up in the courtyard of a museum in Israel with a note left from the person who stole them. The note explained that ever since they took them, he had experienced terrible luck and believed the stones were the reason. He had a very successful business that suddenly began to fail after he took the stones, and later his family abandoned him and he was forced to get rid of almost all of his possessions to settle all of his debts so as to not go bankrupt. He mentioned that he believed the stones were cursed and that they were the root of all of his problems. Whether or not these stones are actually cursed or if this was just some pretty heavy karma, I hope this guy has been able to get his life back on track. In our number 5 spot today we have the Golden Eagle. This car was a 1964 Dodge 330 limited edition, and it has been blamed for the death of around 14 people, which is 14 too many if you ask me. It was said that this car started out as a police car originally, but then there were 3 officers assigned to this car who all ended up taking their lives and other people's lives in horribly violent ways. Not in the car, but still, super weird that this all seemed to happen after they had been using the car for work. Because of this strange correlation, it ended up being sold off to another man. Throughout the 80s and 90s, it was said that because of the rumored cursed car, it became a point of interest for vandals. People began vandalizing the car only to meet their own untimely fates, which were all met in strange ways. For example, it was said that one vandal died from being struck by lightning, and another ended up being decapitated by an 18-wheeler. It is said that the curse is so strong that one kid decided to merely touch the car and it sent him into madness, as he went on to commit atrocious crimes that I can't even detail here on YouTube. The car now belongs to Wendy Allen, who supposedly collects and decorates haunted cars for a living, so it seems as though it's finally found its home far, far, far away from everyone else. In our number 4 spot today we have the Myrtles Plantation Mirror. Myrtles Plantation is located in St. Francisville, Louisiana, and it is said to be one of the most haunted places in the entire world. One of the reasons for this spooky reputation is because of a mirror that resides inside. It is said that this mirror holds the spirit of Sarah Woodruff and her 2 children. Legend goes that a woman named Chloe was a slave at the plantation who drew up a plan to get revenge on the owners of the plantation, Sarah and her husband. Chloe baked a cake full of poison for them, but it ended up only being Sarah and 2 of her children who consumed the poisonous cake. When they passed away, it is said that their spirits went into the only mirror that was uncovered at the time, thus the haunted mirror was born. People who have since visited the plantation have claimed to see the family in the reflection, as well as the handprints of small children on the glass, despite continuous polishing. In our number 3 spot today we have the Surrey Ghost Car. On December 11th of 2002, a call came into the Surrey Police Department. The caller reported that they had just seen a car lose control and run off the road and then presumably crash. It was of course an emergency call, but not necessarily anything out of the ordinary. That was until authorities got to the location and realized that they couldn't find any kind of evidence of a crash. They kept searching and ended up finding a maroon colored car that was nose down in a ditch nearby, but this car was covered in so much undergrowth that it must have been here for months. This meant that somehow this crash went undetected for 5 months, and worst of all, so did the body that lay nearby. Using dental records, they were able to identify the body as a man who had been wanted for robbery since July of that year. It is said that the sighting of the car leaving the road was a ghostly replay of the events that had taken place 5 months prior. What do you guys think? Let me know down below in the comments if you think the witness saw a cursed reenactment of the fatal crash, or if you think something else is at play here. In our number 2 spot today we have the Destiny Ring. Rudolph Valentino was an incredibly famous silent film star before he passed away at the incredibly young age of just 31 years old, and there are many out there who believe his untimely death was caused by the Destiny Ring. This ring was one that he picked up from a California jeweler. Before purchasing it, there were warnings of the stories which claimed this ring was cursed, but Rudolph decided to go ahead with the purchase anyway. It is said that after this ring came into his possession, his luck began to turn. The movies he starred in started to do poorly, some even flopping, and his career began to struggle. From there he fell incredibly ill, and when he passed away he was wearing this cursed ring. ring. From there, after his death, his lover ended up receiving the ring, but once it was in her possession, she too fell extremely ill and decided to give the ring away. All the owners after that were reported to have died in strange ways or under mysterious circumstances, which has led the ring to now being placed in a bank vault, all locked up so that it hopefully can never cause harm to anyone ever again. In our number 1 spot today we have Letta the doll. Why do all the cursed dolls look like they would be cursed? You know what I mean? Like, there's no cursed doll out there that is surprisingly cursed. They all look creepy to begin with. Anyway, Letta is a doll that is said to be around 200 years old and extremely cursed. This doll is called Letta for short, as its full name is Letta Me Out of Here. Really clever. The doll was originally found underneath a house, which definitely feels like the origin story of a haunted doll. This creepy discovery came 47 years ago, and apparently Letta still lives with the man who found him. The hauntings of Letta include things like the doll walking around on its own at night, the owners finding objects around the house that have been moved into odd places. Some people have seen Letta move right in front of their own eyes, and the owner also reports finding little doll-sized scuff marks around the house as well. It is said that this doll once belonged to a child who passed away while holding it, thus their spirit became trapped inside of the doll. Apparently one day in an interview about Letta, as the interviewer was asking questions about the little boy, the doll began to move in her lap. Yeah, no thank you. Letta has his own Instagram and Facebook page in case you want to hear more about all the creepiness surrounding this cursed doll.
Coming in at number 10 we have the diebuck box. A normal object turned supernatural turned cursed. What a journey. The diebuck box is said to be a haunted wine cabinet filled with a restless spirit. Interestingly, the wine cabinet had a Jewish prayer carved into the back of it, which is maybe what attracted the ghoul. The spirit in question is allegedly a Holocaust survivor, Haveka, who escaped to Spain. The box was famously sold on eBay in 2003 and has spent the past 16 years bouncing between owners who don't want it, and I can understand why. It seems each owner has fallen on horrifying misfortune and suffered reoccurring nightmares. One owner suffered a stroke shortly after receiving the box as a gift. Apparently the box has now been hidden by Jewish rabbis, thank goodness. The box actually has a connected film with it, The Possession, which came out in 2012. I think it was based on the wine box events.
In our number 9 spot today we have The Hands Resist Him. The Hands Resist Him is a painting created by artist Bill Stoneham, and it is supposed to represent the doorway that connects our world with the world of the spirits. The doorway to the other side. This is extra suspicious considering owners of the painting have claimed that they have seen the characters in the painting move, or sometimes even disappear at night. The painting is said to depict Bill as a child looking quite sad with a doll with creepy hollow eyes. In the background you can see mysterious hands reaching out towards the boy. The creepiness of the painting is only elevated when we hear the stories of the reported 3 people who passed away after coming into contact with the painting. It ended up kind of disappearing for around 15 years until it popped back up on eBay. Even then, the seller warned potential buyers that the painting was haunted and claimed that the boy in the painting would come out of it and scare their child. The painting ended up being sold for $1,025 to a buyer in Michigan, and at this point it's unclear if they've had any troubles with the rumored hauntings and curses. In our number 8 spot today we have the cursed phone number. I didn't know a phone number could be cursed, but apparently it's true, and I know a phone number technically isn't an object, but I still feel like this had to be included today because it's just too crazy to not. There was a Bulgarian phone number that is said to have been in use for 10 years before it was closed. The reason why it ended up being closed and put out of use is because it is rumored to have belonged to 3 separate people who all died of mysterious circumstances after having been assigned the phone number. Apparently all of the deaths took place shortly after the person had been assigned the number, and they were all seemingly a bit suspicious, thus the rumors of the cursed telephone number began to spread. After this, the company made the decision to suspend the phone number, and they didn't give out details as to why. I wonder if the two are related. In our number 7 spot today we have the Belcourt Castle chairs. Belcourt Castle is located in Newport, Rhode Island, and it is a former summer cottage. Construction on the cottage started in 1891, with it being completed in 1894, and inside there is a ballroom. The ballroom is important because it is said that it holds a group of haunted chairs. People who have visited the castle have reported a ton of strange happenings regarding this specific set of chairs. The reports include things like feeling chills racing up and down their spines, or feeling a strange sensation in a shift of energy while standing near the chairs, and some people have even explained how they have been pushed out of the chairs by an invisible force. I feel like just hearing stories might be enough to explain the energy shift some people are feeling, but actually being pushed out of a chair by some sort of invisible force would be absolutely terrifying. In our number 6 spot today, we have the Anguished Man. While it is unknown who or when it was created, this painting is said to carry some kind of a curse. It is rumored that whoever created it mixed his blood with the oil paint, and when he finished creating it, he ended up taking his own life. When a woman who is referred to as Mrs. Robinson originally took possession of the painting after it was given to her by a family friend, she immediately knew that something was wrong with it. She ended up passing it along to her grandson Sean, who currently still owns the painting. When Sean hung the painting up, they apparently started experiencing paranormal events. The Robinson family has reported many different strange events that have happened in relation to the painting, such as hearing screams and groans coming from it, as well as hearing doors creaking when no one is around them, and being awoken in the middle of the night by blood-curdling screams that they can't find the source of. Sean has even uploaded videos to YouTube where he shows these paranormal events, and it has been reported that the family now keeps the painting hidden away in the basement, which is probably for the best. In our number 5 spot today, we have the Dark Mirror. This mirror now resides within the Traveling Museum of the Paranormal and Occult, and just that alone is enough to know it deserves a spot on today's list. The museum received this mirror from the owner who had purchased it from a psychic fair. It is believed that this mirror was created sometime around the 1820s or 30s, and it is actually quite beautiful to look at, despite the sinister things it seems to hold. The owner who gave it to the museum explained that every time they peered into the mirror, they saw these extremely upsetting things while looking into the dark mirror's reflection. The museum has said that since they added the mirror to their collection, there have been guests who have also reported the same kind of things. Guests have claimed to see things reflected back at them like sightings of their own corpse. In our number 4 spot today, we have Old Nick. Old Nick is often referred to as the Swansea Devil, and his story dates back to the 1890s, although he now resides in the Swansea Museum. So, back in the 1890s, there was the prestigious St. Mary's Church located right in the center of town. The church decided to do some renovations and they put out some ads to hire someone. When a local builder applied for the job and was turned down, he had a major overreaction and decided he wanted to get some kind of revenge. He went and bought the row of cottages that lay next to the church and then demolished them all. In their place, he built large brick offices and then commissioned the carving of Old Nick and placed him right on top of the office building, looking down at St. Mary's Church. Legend goes that he even placed the curse himself by saying, quote, "When your church is destroyed and burnt to the ground, my devil will remain laughing," end quote. Some years later, during World War II, a German blitz came through the town and it left most of it, including St. Mary's, completely destroyed and burnt to the ground. But the office building with Old Nick was undamaged and remained standing. For a while, Old Nick seemed to kind of disappear, but once he resurfaced, there was a petition to put him back to where he was before, as well as a subsequent counter petition to put him far, far away from the rebuilt St. Mary's Church. As of now, Old Nick resides behind glass in the Swansea Museum, and it is said that he is enclosed in glass more for our protection rather than his. In our number 3 spot today, we have the Cursed Portrait. Bernardo de Galvez was born in Spain in 1746, and he went on to become a military leader. He became well known for helping American colonies during the War of Independence before he apparently passed away under mysterious circumstances in 1786. There is a portrait of Bernardo that resides in the Galvez Hotel in Galveston, Texas, which is said to be one of the most haunted hotels in the world, and that makes sense because this portrait is said to be one of the cursed objects that gives the hotel its spooky title. The portrait is located at the end of a hallway in the hotel, and guests have reported the eyes following their every move. People also report a cold or uncomfortable feeling when they get close to the painting, and this is said to be Bernardo's spirit. Some people even swear they can feel him following them around the hotel. It is also said that any picture you try to take of the portrait will come out blurry and distorted unless you ask Bernardo for permission first. In our number 2 spot today, we have the Koh-i-Noor diamond. This diamond has an extremely controversial history and is the source of a lot of debate, but regardless of the ongoing conversations over who really owns it, we are here to talk about the curse that this stone is said to hold. This diamond dates back thousands thousands of years, and its curse is said to only affect men. It is said that the jewel can bring about great wealth, but it can also bring great misfortune as well to those who own it. Folklore states that he who owns this diamond will own the world, but will also know all of its misfortunes. Only God or women can wear it with impunity. Throughout the history of the diamond, it was passed among many people and rulers who all fought bloody battles while in possession of it. Every prince who had it is said to have ultimately lost either their power or their life while in possession of it as well. Part of the controversy of the diamond is how it ended up in the hands of the British royal family during colonization in the 1800s. Ever since then, it has only been worn by female monarchs, including Queen Victoria and Queen Elizabeth. In our number 1 spot today, we have James Dean's car. Okay, this one might seem like a bit of a wild card, but hear me out. Famous actor James Dean passed away from a car accident on September 30th, 1955. At the time, he was driving his silver Porsche 550 Spyder, which he had just recently purchased. This was only the beginning of the car's curse, however, as after James' passing, the remnants of the totaled car were bought by a man named George Barris. He decided to sell parts of the car to James' fans, but when the car was being worked on and taken apart, it ended up falling on a mechanic and it crushed him to death. These two incidents are more than enough to now consider the car cursed, but it still continues on. Once the people who had purchased some of the car parts began receiving them, more strange things happened. 3 of the people who received parts ended up in car accidents, all of which were sadly quite severe. The shell of the car was also stolen, and to this day, it has never been recovered.